Welcome to Amidon Planet. Good talk, real learning, better teaching. I'm Joel Amidon. Let's get started. Today on episode 146, we're continuing our work of exploring ideas and conversations that lead to real learning and better teaching by welcoming back a frequent guest to Amidon Planet. That's right, today I'm joined by Dr. Jeremiah Sims, whose work on radical love and issues of race, equity, inclusion, and justice help us think a little bit more deeply about our own radical becoming. That's a play off of his new book, Finding the Beautiful Path on Blackness, Multidimensionality, and Radical Becoming. So together, we're going to explore what it means to resist simplistic narratives, embrace complexity, and continue growing into a fuller version of ourselves. Again, that idea of a radical becoming. This is just like with any conversation with Jeremiah, it's like you get... There's a lot. It comes quickly, and we just jump into this. So I'm excited to get to it. It's a good conversation. I'm excited to talk to my friend again. But before we dive in, if you're enjoying Amidon Planet, the best way to support this work is to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps others find those conversations or these conversations. You can also share the podcast with a colleague, reach out with ideas or questions by sending me a note to joel@amidonplanet.com. Or join my email list. You can get the dispatch with updates and ways to engage further. Again, just a way to continue the conversation. Anywhere on Amidon Planet where it says join the email list, click that button and you will get the next edition, which should be coming within the next month. And also, given that we're talking about Jeremiah's book, just a reminder on Amidon Planet, we're about good talk, real learning, better teaching, obviously. So when we share a book, it isn't just a book report, right? We're not just, given the summary. We're not just reading the back jacket. Obviously, with Jeremiah, it's a deep conversation. So we're thinking about problems that the book is wrestling with. What change do we think it calls for within our teaching, or just even within our own consideration of who we are? And we do talk about shaping practice, but because if it doesn't move us towards better teaching, it's just information, and because that's the kind of the point of the podcast, is creating these conversations, these opportunities for connection from one person to another, and also to you, the listener, but then to think about what does it mean for us moving forward, right? So I've got a link in the show notes to the book. If you like what you hear, go pick it up. I mean, Jeremiah poured a lot of himself into this book, and I'm excited again that he shared it with me, and I'm excited that we get a chance to kind of touch on it a little bit through this conversation. So if you use that link through Bookshop that's in the show notes at amidonplanet.com/episode 146, it will help support the podcast and also independent bookstores, right? So thanks for being a part of this gathering. Now let's get into today's conversation with Dr. Jeremiah Sims to talk about his book, Finding the Beautiful Path on Blackness, Multidimensionality, and Radical Becoming. Hey, Jeremiah, where are you at? Where is this?
So I'm in Reading right now, Whiskey Town. So Whiskey Town was formerly a town that was flooded at one point. Apparently they made whiskey here. And so this is a beautiful lake behind us. This is where we spend a lot of the summers here. Because in this part of Northern California, we can get to 120 and it's not aberrational. And it's a dry heat. It feels like you have the sun in your backpack, and it is angry at you. Yeah. So we have a pool at home.
Yeah.
When that pool at home doesn't suffice, then we just come here and we hang out. Last year was really funny because we couldn't come for a while. We didn't know what to do with ourselves because the geese poop was so rampant.
Oh, gosh.
They had to close it. Yeah, there's a lot of geese here. So if you see one standing right next to me, there was just one right here. So, Joe, I was starting to tell you about our school. So it's called Acton Academy, Acton. People think it's for thespians. It's not acting, although they do put up plays. It's Acton. And so it's an affiliate model. There's 300 worldwide, at least 300. I'm sure there's one somewhere not too far from where you are. But we have Acton Reading. We took over 3 years ago. The first year, so our kids were all homeschooled.
Yeah.
Everybody was homeschooled during COVID, but our oldest son, who actually just graduated from high school, who you met, Judah. Just graduated from high school. He's 16. So he needs to figure out what he wants to do now because he's so young. But so he had been homeschooled, and Judah scholastically, like, we don't have any questions about where he's going to be. This is a kid who was speaking in sentences at 7 months old. He was reading at 15 months old, potty trained at 3 weeks old. Like, there's just something going on with that kid, right?
Yeah.
And so we never worried about him scholastically. And so when he was in public school, they kept skipping him. He skipped 2 grades, and you can only skip kids so far. They're going to be too small, right? There's all these other issues that adhere around that. And so we homeschooled him at his request, and scholastically, again, he was fine, but just humanly, like he couldn't maintain friendships with kids his own age because he was socially like awkward to the point where it was almost crippling for him.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't speak, he wouldn't look people in the eye. And so, and he's the oldest of six boys. And so most of his interactions were from a very particular position, that of the oldest brother. And,
Yeah.
and we leaned on him a lot because we were both working a lot at that time. And so he didn't really know how to be in community with kids his age. So we heard about this school. Rachel did the research. I did not do the research. And she wanted to give it a try. And so we took Judah to Acton Academy Reading, which had been up and running about 4 years at that time. And he was coming home crying every day. And I'm like, man, I'm not sending my kid to this school so he can cry every day. Like, this is not, doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But Rachel was like, well, you got to give him some time. Let's just see what happens. And I know, and we'll talk about this later when we talk about the book. Like, I got all this vicarious trauma, firsthand trauma.
Yeah.
And so I just am hyper aware of being protective. And sometimes that looks like, excessive or overprotection or like a helicopter parent. And so I'm aware of that, and being aware of it helps some, but it's not it's not enough in the moment sometimes. And so
Yeah.
that's what we'll talk about there in the book. So anyway, Judah went to this school, and then they did some kind of was it like a personality test or something like that. And he got like 90% thinking and 10% emotion. And for him, like that totally changed everything, because for him, I think it was probably wouldn't acknowledge this at the time. He was 13, but it was like a validation for the way that his mind works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in only 3 months, Joel, after years and years of me worrying and crying and praying that he was just not going to be able to find his people, like he had completely come out of his shell. It was incredible. And so he started calling himself Mr. 90% because he got 90% thinking. Right. And so that really shifted, because even like it's such a contrast, because just 2 months prior during the orientation, he didn't want to go in to the building. We were standing outside the door, but it's all glass. And so he was worried people were going to look at him if we were late, but we weren't late. But he was so anxious about it, he made himself late. So then it was even harder to go in.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it's one of the hardest things I've done as a parent, because I give my kids out probably more than I should, because I'm trying to balance their mental health with also challenging him. And I was ready, all right, well, let's just go home. Let's forget it. Let's just go home. But I couldn't. I was like, man, I got to stick this out for him. I got to stick it out for him. So I'm crying. He's crying. I'm praying what he was doing. And he finally went in, and it was fine.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so the owners, her husband, he fabricates homes. It's a crazy thing. It's like they use a 3D printer to make homes, right?
Oh gosh, wow.
So, cool. Yeah. Like, I'm talking about like some crazy machining going on there. And so they got a contract in Puerto Rico. I think she was working really, really hard by herself to try to keep the school running. So they were out. And so Rachel and I, we had a little bit of extra change at that time, and we decided to buy the school. So we've had it for 3 years. And it's like, so my advisor, Jabari Mahiri, is a, distinguished professor at University of California, Berkeley. He came to visit, because he's my mentor, he's my friend. He came to visit, and he visited for just maybe an hour and a half. He came back 2 weeks later with his whole research team from UC Berkeley.
Oh, wow. Because
the amount of kind of intentional but like non-didactic social emotional learning that's going on there, he said he hadn't seen anything like that before. And so I think they're going to write a book chapter at the very least, and some other things about it. And so his whole team was there for a week, and they were, wow, these are people who study education. And the cool thing about it is it has nothing to do with us. It's just creating space for these kids. So we have core principles, right? Our core principles are, around responsibility and accountability. But the one I think that makes this school different is beloved community, right? The idea of creating a space where, and this speaks to your work too, right? Where love takes hold. And so, it's just incredible. So my official title there, because I'm working now, I'm not able to be at the school as much as I was, is the beloved community builder. Nice. And so I just go by and I just hug kids and give them fist bumps and take them out to lunch sometime. And that's the entirety of my role there, but it means so much. So anyway, I won't go too long, but the thing that makes it so crazy, I think this is a microcosm. Every year they do a play. I don't know, haven't met your family. You seem like the type of family that at some point has watched The Greatest Showman.
Yeah,
it's incredible. I cried so much when I watched that. I didn't realize a musical could be that good. I'm not a musical type of person, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, These kids, every year they do a play. We as adults don't get to do anything. Like we'll go get stuff from the store because they don't drive.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
as far as designing it, doing the auditions, they run the whole thing. So we never know what it's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then they invite the whole community. And knowing that, so they did it, they took it fairly light. Like they did the Lorax, then they did the Lion King. It was like, okay, they can handle that. And both were incredible. This year they chose to do The Greatest Showman.
Wow.
All
Oh
led
my
by
goodness.
everyone backstage, everyone front stage, all the actors, all the audition, the script, the music choices, the music engineering is all done by children. And it was incredible. It was
Nice.
incredible. I mean, it was just like I cried all the way through.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I didn't get to watch the main play because I had the graduation at my school, but I had to at the college I work at. But I got to see the dress rehearsal. I'll send you some of these videos, man. You got to see this stuff. So anyway, like that school, the way that the school is run, we have 75 students now. When Rachel took over, there was only 15, so she's been doing an incredible job.
Yeah.
And this is K-12, and like just creating space for these young people to be fully human and not have their academic identity be the leading part of who they are has been I think it creates an opening. And at the same time, while we're not forefronting their academic identity necessarily, it develops in this process, right? Like, go figure, right? And so I'll pause there if you have any questions about it, but it's just, I can't say enough about the work that they do there. It's incredible.
I mean, that sounds just, I mean, bridging to the book, that sounds just like when you talked about, like when you have people introduce themselves, like they're not introducing with their roles and titles and things like that, but just like a cultural introduction. It's like you're saying, hey, bring that to the school, be that, and then get some education going. So that sounds beautiful.
We don't want to prepare them to simply be cogs in the wheel. We want them to look at the wheel and figure out whether or not the wheel is even worth salvaging. And if not, how do we recreate the wheel so that it's commensurate with justice? Yeah. And so our guiding question, and this is a big one for kids, right? Because we grew up without social media. Like I didn't have to. There may be 5 or 6 people in my immediate kind of sphere of who could determine the way I feel about myself on any given day when I was growing up. But these kids have access to people all around the world that can tell them they're sufficient or insufficient or any other thing. So the guiding question the last 2 years has been, last year was, is truth discovered or is truth created? Right. Which is a huge question, right? You start talking about fake news, all these things. And then this year, the guiding question is, what does it mean to be human? And so this is really interesting. So this just came out with our 5 to 7 year olds. Our 5 to 7 year olds. So this is what John Dewey talked about, is constructivist education, and it's with the smattering of Montessori education, right, which is based on Dewey and Montessori, obviously. And so the idea Dewey had was, what's up, buddy? He had mixed studios, right? So we have we don't have grades. We have studios. So the Spark studio is Montessori, and that's 5, 6, 7, 8, depending on how well they read, right? You got to be able to read it. Then the next studio is the Adventure Studio. And then that's elementary school. Then there's a Discovery Studio. And then the high school studio is Launchpad. And then there's something called the NGA, which is the Next Grade Adventure. So the whole idea is to launch you into something. And so for our young kids, because they all get the same question, you think about 5 to 7 year olds, right? 5 to 8 year olds. What does it mean to be human? They're like, well, it means you have 2 arms, you have 2 legs, you have, eyes, right? And so this is the pre, right? Great. It's cute. They drew the picture out. And so they drew these like stick figures towards the end of the year. Right. And we didn't revisit the question again after that.
Yeah.
Not in a way that's didactic, right? It's just, it permeates the curriculum. At the end of the year, what does it mean to be human? And then they didn't draw stick figures. They drew words. It means to be kind. It means to be loving, right? Those types. I'm about to tear up now. But those are the types of shifts that you see in that atmosphere, right? And so just, tying it back to the book, that's just like this radical becoming, right? Because we're always becoming. We're still on this earth. I mean, even if we're under the earth, we're still becoming. We're just becoming fertilizer at that point. But as long as we're here on this plane, we're becoming. And you can become better. Yeah. Or you can become worse, right? And the word radical means to fundamentally change the nature of something. And I know, because we get letters from the parents, I know that we are fundamentally changing the nature, not just of the young folks that we're blessed to be able to serve, but also the families that they serve. Because the families will come back and talk to us about really practical things. Like I don't have to ask them to clean their room anymore, because even our little kids, every single day, there's something called studio maintenance where they have to clean up, right? They have to clean up several times a day. No adult's going to do it for them.
Right.
Right. And so just those types of things, because we were, while I was writing this book, I was a guide for the middle schoolers. Middle school's a tough age too, man.
Yeah.
I was a guide for the middle schoolers. Maybe not for them. It certainly was for me. And then, for us, like we're educators, but Joe, you can't go in there and tell them anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's an answer, and they could be doing something wrong, right? As a math guy, and you can't give them the answer. You know that already, but it's like, okay, well, let me help you think about the nature of right and wrong, right? You just answer, like, what does it mean for this to be the correct equation, right? First, you have enough information to even solve the equation. And let me take a step back. So all you're ever doing is launching these kind of Socratic questions that get them to wrestle with their understanding of the thing. But you can't tell them. I'm used to just like, at some point, as a dad, as an educator, as a parent, I was like, man, this is the right answer. Just do the right thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we're talking about social issues, right? And they're like, well, Black people are disproportionately unemployed because they're lazy. I want to correct that. I'm like, okay, well, are there people that you can find who challenge that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm one of those, but I can't do that. So that was the part. I didn't realize how much traditional educator. I thought of myself as a critical pedagogue. I didn't realize how traditional my pedagogy was until I was in that space. I struggled.
Yeah. Well, man, this reminds me of our first conversation where it felt like I was hanging on and like the fire hose was going, and I'm just like all this great stuff. I love it. So Jeremiah Sims, thank you for coming back to Amazon Planet. I've been excited to talk about this book. I mean, ever since I think on LinkedIn you put out like, hey, here's some titles, here's some covers that I'm thinking. So like knowing this is coming, I'm like, hey Jeremiah, when you got it, hey, let's come on and talk about it. And I'm very grateful that you shared the book. But just to get us a little bit started, like you shared, you're the and I'm gonna miss the title, community builder.
Acton Academy. I'm the beloved community builder. I work at the College of the Siskiyous. I'm a dean of career technical education at the College of the Siskiyous up here.
Yeah. And then still doing work with Rooted in Love and.
Yeah, still doing work with Rooted in Love. I mean, to be honest, this administration has shifted priorities. So this current presidential administration.
Yeah.
You know that well, right?
Absolutely.
Because grants have been impacted and all those things. So so there's still some, it's still hanging on. We still get to work with some folks, but primarily Rachel is doing acting and I'm a dean now. But Rooted in Love is still viable. It's just, we are our time is invested in other enterprises as well.
Yeah. And so I love again, thank you for spending some time here, but the book, Finding the Beautiful Path on Blackness, Multidimensionality, and Radical Becoming. Man, I mean, you shared the book with me and I was very thankful. So I've been, digesting it and like, I don't know, like trying to describe, it feels like a personal memoir, like these letters to your loved ones, and then like just even talking about all the things. I don't know, like how would you describe this endeavor, this book that you're? I mean, it feels like like we just developed a relationship, and I'm just reading the book even more. Like getting into knowing all about you. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I was working with a client with Rooted in Love, who was 3 hours and 45 minutes away. And I had to go there quite a bit. So maybe I go twice a week.
Wow.
And so, and this particular stretch of, and you can't fly, right? Because it's a small town to a small town.
Yeah.
And so we have a small one terminal airport. They have a small one terminal airport. I would have had to go to San Francisco and it just wouldn't work. So anyway, during this drive, there's no reception. There's nothing. So all I could do, I had satellite radio in my car, right? I couldn't really listen to the radio unless I remembered to download something first.
Yeah.
So I recorded it. So this is interesting. Like that, this is my fourth book. The other three books that I've written or contributed to is, I sit down with my laptop and I just type away, right? I'm not super fast, but I get it done. At least 60-70% of this book was voice to text that I went back and finished. So part of this is going to read like stream of consciousness, right?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense now. Yeah.
Right. So I had probably like and not all of it made it into the book, but I had like 40 hours of recordings to go back through and try to shape into something.
Yeah.
And so that's why it was so different. But in the same way, so I don't recommend that process because AI voice to text is not there enough, or either that or I mumble, but it was like a lot of work. It's a lot of work to go back and fix it.
Yeah.
But also in some respects it was liberating, right? Because when you're speaking it, you can't go back and check it. Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm writing, I'm like, I don't know how that looks. Let me fix that. Let me change this thing.
Yeah.
But this was different. And I tried to, as best I could, as long as it was coherent, just run with the way that I spoke it, because that was my heart. It was, it was outpouring of my heart.
Yeah. Well, you could tell, like, I mean, I just read something this morning where it's like you had a realization about your own experience in the, like, it was like
Right.
in the text, like, I just realizing this right now as I'm writing this. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Like, but just embracing that process. But
Yeah.
so what drew you to doing it? Like, I mean, again, this is like, it feels, I put down some descriptors, like it's personal.
Right.
There's educate, like this, like you're using your story as context for a
Yeah.
lot of ideas. And there's some scientific stuff, like I learned about like what makes it scar tissue and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But talking about black joy, radical, I mean, like all these sorts of things. Like, what drew you to like, hey, I want to put this together?
Yeah. So it's in two waves, right? Because when I first started writing the book, the current administration was not in office, right? So the landscape looked very different. The
Yeah.
landscape work looked very different. And so I hope it's not too cynical, but towards the end, right, things have shifted. And now I'm like, there's a difference. So let me get some context. So at the same time, I was doing just exclusively rooted in love stuff. We were working with working with several colleges. I mean, I think over maybe a 3-year period, I might have worked with 40 colleges in some
Yeah.
capacity. We had a college we were working with. We got a grant to work with them for about 3 years. And this is a college that was facing a great deal of turmoil. And so we came on, we were hired initially to create a mentorship program for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color faculty retention. We decided to create a mentee-led program because then you take away that kind of hierarchical relationship between tenured faculty and new faculty. But in doing that work, and I knew the president of this college, we had worked together previously. There was a crisis going on there. There was and this is public record. I'm not going to name him obviously, but it's public record. So there was an administrator there who 27 women came forward and said that he had harassed them.
Oh, wow.
But he didn't get fired. And so he turned out to be polarizing. There were some people who advocated for him. There were many people who did not. And the response from the college was not satisfactory. I don't know if there even is a satisfactory response from a college in a situation like that. And so they said to me, Jeremiah, we want to do some listening sessions. I'm a race, equity, inclusion, and justice person. I studied critical race theory, critical theory, right? But I'm not a counselor by any stretch of the imagination, right? Yeah. And so I wanted to be able to have the conversations, because mainly it was just as a researcher. Like I didn't have to offer any type of prescription because I'm not qualified to do so. Yeah. I just needed to listen and chronicle, right? But I wanted to do better. I wanted to make sure that I was creating safe spaces for these folks to speak their truth to power. And so I took some online courses, and they were interactive online courses. The first was trauma-informed coaching.
Yeah.
I think it's called the Center for Healing. And so this is like the neuroscience of dealing with trauma. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, I was taking another course through an organization called Seek Healing. It was a year-long course. And it was listening and belonging training, right? And so I got certification in both of those things. And so while I was writing this book, I'm working through all these things at the same time, right? And I realized that while I can be a asset, a resource to folks who are in spaces where they don't feel like they belong, it's like, man, I got a lot of stuff too. I got stuff going on too, because I grew up in an environment in Richmond, California, where, if you saw a few laws, I sit around crying about stuff, what I mean? Like I just buried everything.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what's that one? There's that Saved by the Bell. The Saved by the Bell comes from, you know where that comes from? Not the TV stuff.
Oh, no.
So when people were they were in caskets, they were putting bells in the caskets because they kept finding all these, when they would exhume caskets for whatever reason, there were scratch marks on the inside.
Oh
Right. It's a long,
gosh.
long time ago. So they were burying people who were still
Oh
alive.
my gosh.
And so they started putting bells in there so they could ring a bell so people would realize they're not actually dead. I don't know what was going on at the time. Maybe it was a bubonic plague. Something was happening where people were appearing to
Saved
be
by the
dead, but
Bell.
they weren't necessarily dead. So
Yeah.
that's where Saved by the Bell comes from, the saying. And so when I was burying all these different things, it was the same thing. They weren't actually dead. I was burying things that were alive. And so
Mm.
it would come out, right? They would kind of zombify and they would come out when I'm dealing with my kids, right? Like they do something really, really mundane. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? I mean, what am I doing? I'm making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but it's because there's this interrupted energies that I haven't processed yet. I haven't metabolized all these different things. And so anyway, in dealing with these courses, it made me go inside and realize how much stuff. And then there's a seminal moment in the book. I'll tie this back to the book. So Judah, my oldest son, so I grew up in a space where my mom was abused,
Mm-hmm.
and and I saw it, right, and I was abused, and I experienced it physically, right, not just emotionally. And so I developed this really, really thick skin, and I was also really, really aggressive, right, because I didn't want to be harmed. And so I was in a space where if somebody did something to me, I was just going to react a certain way, and usually it was going to be an over the top reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, so Judah, this was 5 years ago. We had just moved to Reading. Reading is a former sundown town. Sundown towns where black and brown folks, Asian folks had to be out before sundown because whatever limited protection they had prior to that didn't exist after sundown, right?
Mm.
So they could be harmed with impunity. And it's not like when the sun up that actually protected them either. So Reading had that reputation, right? It's shifting demographically and politically. It's shifting, but it's MAGA country. It's a stronghold, right? And I'm not judging anybody based on their political beliefs, but I come from the Bay Area where it's very different.
Right.
Um, and so anyhow, coming here, I was always hypersensitive to how people are going to perceive. And Joel's met my kids. My kids are all black, white, and Chinese, but phenotypically they present differently. Like I have kids who phenotypically present African American. I have kids who have dirty blonde hair and blue eyes, right? And so, even though the same family, right, they're going to experience the world very differently.
Yeah.
And so Judah, certainly my oldest son, presents as African American, right? And so he came back from swim practice, and he was in my truck, and I was asking him how it was going. And, teenagers, man, teenagers don't always want to open up about a whole bunch of stuff anyway. And so I expect that, but it was weird because he wouldn't turn around and look at me. And I think I included this in the book.
Yeah,
he wouldn't turn around. He wouldn't face me. And it was like, I'm like, buddy, turn around. Like, I'm not insistent with very much with my kids. I just give them space to be. I was like, man, I want to look at you while I'm talking to you because it was weird. It wasn't sideways. Like the back of his head was to me. And he turned around. He had a black eye.
No.
And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm a Second Amendment proponent. I'll say that, right? Within reason. I'm like, well, I'm gonna go air this whole place out. Like all the Richmond that I thought was buried came up all in one moment. Like I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna do something that's gonna get me incarcerated. And some people are gonna get hurt because nobody's gonna hurt my baby, right? And this is, social justice warrior, right? I've already gone through all the education about whatever I can learn about how to treat people with humanity. All that was out the window when I thought someone harmed my child, right? Yeah. And so, I didn't reflect on this at the time, Joel. I wish I was able to. I think I'm better. I'm in a better place now. But, I felt that way because I'd always felt unprotected, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have someone who could advocate for me like that because my mom couldn't advocate for herself. So anyway, turns out nobody hurt my baby. He was swimming. I say baby. I can't say that in front of him because he's 16. And
Yeah.
you know how it goes when your boys get big.
Oh yeah.
But he was swimming, and someone in the same lane, just as they were swimming, hit his goggle, pinched him, and caused a black eye. But what I realized is that he didn't want to tell me about that because he didn't want that type of reaction. Right? He couldn't have known it because he didn't know me. I'm not like that. I'm gentle with them. But there was something in the way that I was asking the questions where he realized that I was not fully present, that I was taking it to a different place, right? And he's a smart kid. And I realized in that moment that I can be different. I was 45 at that time, right?
Yeah.
I can be different because all the way up until that moment, 45 years old, everything was causal to me, not correlational. You do this, then I'm going to do this. If
Yeah.
A, then B, therefore, see, that's just what it is. I'm going to react this way. And it was almost as though I had given over to kind of my basis instinct. Like, I can't even do anything about it. That's just how I am. That's just who I am.
Well, it's
I
like
would
you
say,
heard that bell, right? Like that
right,
thing
right.
that you thought you buried, like just came.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But I happily would pry the lid off though, right?
Mm.
And hold hands with that thing. And so it was in that very moment where I realized, wait a minute, if I make a different choice, I can be different, right? And that to me was a kind of instantiation of that radical becoming, right? And so that's what catalyzed all these thoughts for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, like you're talking about all the different things, like you talk about that story. I mean, all these stories from when you're a kid, but then also contextualized with, some of the things. Well, you just provided some context around like sundown towns and all laws and even what is it, drapetomania?
Oh, drapetomania. Drapetomania is an interesting one.
Yeah.
So drapetomania they had a lot of pseudoscience at this time, right? Because they didn't quite understand how science worked. And that a lot of the pseudosciences actually were developed to explain white supremacy and racialized capitalism, right?
Yeah.
So there were ways to justify the mistreatment of people, because you got people who ostensibly came to America for religious freedom. These people are, some form or another consider themselves to be Christians. And so, in the New Testament, you can't actually own another human being. There's slavery in the New Testament, but it's very different than chattel slavery we saw with African folks here, right? Because people could purchase their way out of slavery. They could marry their way. They weren't slaves in perpetuity. And so here in the United States, in order to justify the enslavement of human beings, first you had to make them non-humans, right? Which is where you get something like the three-fifths compromise. And then they use science to explain that. And I talked about this. Like there was a report in 2016, a study done with pre-med students at John Hopkins University. 53, somewhere around 50, above 50, more than half, but not as much as 60% of the students interviewed, this is in 2016, still believed that Black people had an inherently higher pain threshold than any other group. Right. So for somebody to think that, okay, that's a problem. But for doctors to think that, that's really a problem. Right. That's not the only explanatory tool, but that's one of the ways to understand why Black women, irrespective of income strata, still die at 3 times the rate of any other group of women during childbirth. Right.
Yeah.
It's those type of Black folks are typically underdiagnosed. So all those things still matter today. So drapetomania was another pseudoscience. And so all these, the umbrella term for these sciences, I'm not making this up, was Niggerology, right?
Yeah,
so that's what it was called. And so it can get super creative. It's like the same person that probably named the housefly. Like, oh, look at flies, a fly, right? All right, they crack up about that kind of stuff. So anyway, not this part. So drapetomania was a diagnosis that was ascribed to enslaved Africans who sought to free themselves from enslavement. So if they escaped from the plantation, they were diagnosed with drapetomania, which meant that they could be remanded back to the custody of their slave owners. And so drapetomania was again, a pseudoscientific concept that was sutured to Black folks because they were like, because you got to remember, Black people at this time were considered like cows, right? They were cattle. And so for them to seek to escape, right, it meant that there was something like, why would they leave these benevolent masters? But it's interesting. So there's another phenomena that I learned about while researching this book, and it's called the Casual Killing Act of 1669. And that was really interesting to me. Gosh, and it really pertains to the work that we do as educators. And so then there's another book that was like one of the kind of backbones for my study was Resma Minicum's 2017 book, My Grandmother's Hands. And so in that book, he talks about something called, he's like, we could talk about white supremacy all we want until the cows come home, or racism. He said, we're missing the point. It's not about white supremacy. It's about white body supremacy. So he talks about how this white white supremacy is not conceptual or emotional. It's not just juridical, though. It's all those things. It's actually embodied. Like we have it in our system. And so we need to figure out how to excise it from our system. Otherwise, we'll never actually be free, right? And so we call that white body supremacy. And so I'm foreshadowing that. So this Casual Killing Act of 1669, what would happen is that plantation owners, they were, it's a trigger warning, but they were raping, and we got to be honest, right? Primarily raping little black girls, right? So it's pedophilia, right? It's rape and it's pedophilia, right? They would rape women, they raped men too, but men didn't produce children, right? So there wasn't the same level of evidence. And so these little girls were being raped and they were producing offspring, right? And these mixed race children, back then we had something called the one drop rule, right? So they were considered to be black. And in America, it's really interesting because in most places, your lot in life follows a patrilineal line. Whatever your father was, that's what you were, right? Mm-hmm. If your father was a free person, you're a free person. But in America, we shifted to something called hypodescent, which it means that your lot in life is determined by your matrilineal line, right, from your mom. And so the reason we did that, it adheres around this, the spirit that animated the Casual Killing Act of 1669. And so what happened was these scorned white women who were plantation owners, they were angry at their husbands for raping these little girls, right, what they considered to be beasts of burden, and producing children. So these women were killing these children in some of the most sadistic ways, and I'll spare you, but some of the most sadistic ways that you can think of, right?
Yeah.
And so what was happening as a result, I'll put my hood on, the sun's out now. What was happening as a result was it was so widespread that they created a law to protect these rich white women. Because you remember, only rich white people owned slaves, right? It wasn't everyone. And so these rich white women were killing these children so much that they created a law called the Casual Killing Act of 1669. So they couldn't be prosecuted for killing these children. Okay. So that's sick. That's a vestige of our history in this country. But why does it matter today? Well, it matters today because Black students are still disproportionately expelled and suspended, much higher than any other ethno-racial group in our schools today, right? Even in 2026. And who are our teachers? Well, our teachers are overwhelmingly white women, right? I'm going to shift away from the sun. And so, right, so what that speaks to is that deeply embodied aversion to, or what we would call anti-Blackness, a deeply embodied aversion to these little Black bodies, right? So they're not killing them anymore, right? So that's progress. But there's a kind of educational and spiritual and emotional death that these kids suffer because that aversion to Black bodies has been inwrought into the endocrine systems, the cells, right? There's something called methylation, right? Where a certain level of, trauma it changes the way that your DNA fires, essentially, right? It doesn't change the sequence, but it puts certain markers on there so that certain things cause your autonomic nervous system to spark up. And so to me, there's a clear through line from the Casual Killing Act of 1669 to the disproportionate amount of suspensions and expulsions that we see for Black and brown students, right? It's because we never dealt with it. As a country, we never actually dealt with it. As a people, we never tried to excise these things from our bodies. And so those are the types of connections I make throughout the book, because it's just like, we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it, right?
Yeah.
And so at the same time, I was reading several different books. I'm always reading several different books. And so I got a lot of inspiration from Michael Harriot's phenomenal best-selling book, Black AF History. And so he didn't speak about this, but some of the things that he did speak to made me want to dig deeper. And so some of those stories, that's where those connections would come from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like, again, you telling stories and then connecting it to, some of these the history and the science and things that you're bringing up is, again, it made sense, but like, it was like, oh, wow, we're going here. And like, but talking about this idea,
I didn't always know.
yeah. But you had this thing where you said, like, we talk about empathy as a radical act of connection and resistance, and like, think like, okay, there's trying to make some connections here to at least my own, thinking about my own experience or my, understanding of you, or thinking about like what you're saying here. And then also too, to some of these, the history, and again, the history and the science and all the other things that you're bringing up.
Right. And the point in bringing those things up is if we're willing to address it, all of us, right? We all got stuff, man. I got stuff. It's not just my brothers and sisters who are racialized as white. We all have stuff. If we're willing to deal with it, then we're in the process of radical becoming, right?
Yeah.
That's the point that I'm trying to make, right? Because this is what my late great Maya Angelou said, right? She said, you just do the best you can until you know better. But once you know better, you do
Yeah.
better, right? And so
Right.
that's ultimately what this book is trying to arrive at. I mean, it's some personal stuff, but like, here's some stuff we can work on. If we choose to work on it, we're already moving towards that beautiful path.
Yeah. And I mean, thinking about some of the, the learning from it, and again, some of the all the other things that you're sharing within there, but even too, like learning from your story. Like I remember you told a story about you having to get a bike because your car broke down in order to try to get to
Yeah.
work and everything, and thinking about just the I don't know, like the connections between, all right, don't have a light, had to get the bike to get to the bus, don't have a light
Yeah.
on the bike, get pulled over, get arrested because somebody's
Yeah.
using your ID, like all these sorts of things that are, that catalog, versus like thinking about, well, what happens if I have that same
Yeah.
experience, right? Where, but it's not that it would not be the same experience,
No, no,
like
no,
not
no.
at all, and thinking about like what does that mean? What does that mean? And again, think about this idea of radical becoming and like
Yeah.
developing the empathy and thinking about like, okay, so what does that mean for what do I do in my own spaces, right?
Yeah, we can't. I don't think we can be whole. If we can't be empathetic, we can't be whole. This because we're cutting ourselves off from experiences. So I want to take a step back to the title real quick, and then
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
reconnect it. Right. So, um, so the title of the book comes from phenomenal book. I want to say 2015. Professor Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a botany professor.
Mm-hmm.
She is Potawatomi, Indigenous American, and so Indigenous American is kind of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Tautological, right? It's repetitive. I mean, she's
Mm-hmm.
indigenous, she's
Yeah, yeah.
Native American. And so anyway, so she wrote a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. If you haven't read it, you got to read it. She's a science professor. She's connecting us to the real world. And in the book, she juxtaposes, and it's not hierarchical, but she juxtaposes Western scientific cosmology, and she juxtaposes it with indigenous scientific cosmology, right? And she said in the West, and you know this well, Joe. I mean, in the West, we kind of fetishize the mind to a lesser degree. We'll talk about the body a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
we're really concerned with how we can impress in the mind, how we can
Yeah, yeah.
inculcate, and those are the types. I mean, our learning scientists, that's what they focus on, right? And so, you know, but she says that in indigenous traditions, you look at the mind and the body, yeah, but you also look at the soul and the spirit. And in this book, she offers this beautiful line that I've been chewing on for years. I think I understand it, and just when I think I got it, then I realize I don't. But she says it's important to focus on the mind, the body, the soul, and the spirit, because when you do that, you hold the potential to become whole. And she says it is the whole person who finds the beautiful path.
Mm.
And so my book was kind of uh, uh, based on that, right? I want to find this beautiful path. Uh, and then I realized, in going through this trauma work and stuff, like healing is not binary. I always thought that. I always thought either you're healed or you're
Mm.
not. But it's a recursive process. That radical becoming is becoming healed. The beautiful path is a path towards healing, right? And so becoming healed, like that really helped me. And another book that I recommend is a phenomenal book. It's mentioned several times in my own book, is What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry. And he co-wrote it with Oprah Winfrey. That should be funny for you, right? Because you remember.
Yeah, yeah.
So he co-wrote. I should come back there and tell everybody that I read a book that Oprah Winfrey co-wrote. That's a inside joke. Anyway, so that book is called What Happened to You, and so it like radically reimagines trauma, right? So he talks about how PTSD is a problematic concept, right? Not that people suffer, but if you this has happened to me before. I had to go to the bathroom really bad. I run to a restaurant, and then the sign on the bathroom door says "out of order," right? Which literally means disorder.
Yeah,
Means it's broken. You can't use it. It's inaccessible. And he says that we're not broken. Something just happened to us. So
yeah,
he talks about post post traumatic, like post injury traumatic stress, right?
yeah.
So nothing is wrong with you. Something happened to you, right? And you think about Black folks. So what happened? The Middle Passage happened. Chattel slavery happened. Mass incarceration happened. Right? All for all different people, things happen to them, but there's nothing wrong with them. But Blackness, by and large, even historically, has been pathologized, right? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with it. Um, Even if you look at like, simple things like black magic vis-a-vis white magic, right? Black magic is
Right.
evil, white magic is not, right? So there's this concept of kind of pathology suited to blackness, but the reality is there's nothing wrong with Black people. And I knew that, right? but the way that he talked about, something just happened to you and then your body reacts. He said, so so how your body reacts, whatever that adaptation is, right? That's where trauma lives.
Yeah.
So he gave the example in his book about folks who had served, had seen combat, right? And then, I see signs all the time because there's a large veteran community here where veteran lives here during 4th of July. So you can be conscientious of that,
Right.
right? And so, he talked about how those things activate our ANS, our autonomic nervous system. And so our autonomic nervous system determines whether or not we want to fight, freeze, fawn, or flee.
Right.
And so in speaking to all those things, right, it helped me understand that irrespective of whether or not people see the world that I do, they're just people, and what they hold dear is what they hold dear based on their lived experiences. It's not because they hate me, right?
Yeah.
It's not because they're considering me at all, right? It's just because their life experiences have led them to a certain belief system. And then there's another book, it's called uh, Conflict Equals Energy. And in that book, Jason Diggs talks about how the true sign of intelligence is being able to hold your viewpoints, your worldview, your epistemology with a certain level of esteem, and hold people whose viewpoints differ from yours with the same level of esteem, understanding that their life experiences, just like your life experiences, inform the way that they think. And so that kind of work was seminal for me. So going back to Bruce Perry and Jason Diggs, Dr. Bruce Perry, Oprah, and Jason Diggs, like thinking about how to understand that just because I see a world a certain way doesn't mean I always have to see it that way. And that's true for everybody else. That was actually really liberating.
Yeah. Well, and then seeing how you organize the book from the wound, part one is the wound, part
Yeah.
two is the scar, and then part three is the healing,
Yeah.
all part of the beautiful path.
Right.
Like,
And I'm still walking it.
yeah,
I'm still
yeah.
walking. Yeah. Just
Well,
like you.
yeah,
Everybody.
like in like radical becoming, it's not. It's like it's always right, always happening,
Yeah.
right?
We're in recur. So this is a real quick point. Jason Diggs talked about this in his book. Joel, you're a noun. I'm a noun, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're also verbs because we're always in constant. And there's something I didn't write about this in the book. I learned about it later. And there's something, but it directly relates. I wish I had been able to name this. There's something called the end of history illusion bias.
Mm-hmm.
So the end of history illusion bias is a bias wherein we recognize that we've shifted. Like I'm 50 now. I'm different than when I was 25, right?
Yeah.
I'm different than when I was 40, right? I can recognize those shifts just like you can. But when we're facing something in the moment, we don't recognize, well, like when we see ourselves getting through something and getting to the other side of things, we think we're going to do it as the person we are entering it. That's the
Mm-hmm.
end of history bias. And we fail to recognize this radical becoming that happens throughout the process of change, right? And so when we do that, we cut off our ability to be reflective about how we're shifting, right? So that's ultimately what I was speaking against. I just didn't have the terminology for it at the time.
Yeah. Well, and there's some things that in the book that I just want to talk, or I'd like you to talk
Yeah,
about a little bit.
for
Like at the
sure.
beginning, especially when you're talking about the almost like setting the stage for the book. You're talking about this
Yeah,
idea of not wanting to flatten. I
yeah,
think you talk about like flattening blackness, and if you could talk
yeah,
about that a little bit more, because I thought that was like again part of that setting the stage for what you want to
yeah.
talk about, especially when you talk about your own experiences.
Right. So yeah, so the idea of flattening, like stereotypes by nature are flattening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Stereotypes say that all people are a certain way because they share whatever characteristics, right?
Right.
Um, whatever stereotype you've heard, the purpose of it is to flatten the multidimensionality of an individual and a group of people. And so blackness, right, when I talk about how it's been pathologized, there's a kind of, it's almost seemingly intractable connection between blackness and criminality in this world, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we see this all the time, right? Or blackness and uh absentee father right? Like there's
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
there's stereotypes, right? But they are seeking to make a multi-dimensional people uh one thing that's easy to describe, easy to compartmentalize, and therefore easy to control. And it's true of everybody. Women are this way, white people are this way, Asian American folks are this way.
Mississippians.
Uh,
I was like
right,
thinking that.
Mississippi, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mississippians are this way. Right. Because I came to Reading, man, and I expected people to act a certain way, and I've been pleasantly shocked at the treatment that I've received here. I mean, it's just been totally communal, very different than all the stereotypes that I heard and I believed. Being honest, I believed before we came here, and so. And so that flattening is intentional, and it's not just interpersonal, right? It happens at the institutional level, right? When you talk about low income students, right, or unprepared students, we act as though all unprepared students are quote unquote unprepared for the same reason. They're not, right? There's all different myriad considerations. And so the whole idea of flattening is just that, right? Like, let me just, because it makes it easier to digest. Like in human beings, we have schema on purpose. We have different schemas because that way we don't have to wrestle with all the information that we get on a daily basis. We're actually bombarded with information. The reason why we don't have to wrestle with it in a way that causes cognitive dissonance is because we have these schemas already. All right, I see that person over there. They're this kind of person. Don't have to worry about them. Might have to worry about this guy because he's a white guy and he has biker looking clothes on. Maybe I have to worry about him. Don't have
I see this guy riding a bike at 12:30 at night. Like,
right.
Yeah.
He's not supposed to be here. And so the idea is to talk about, so I use my own example. Like, yeah, I'm a social justice warrior. I'm a firm adherent to the principles of nonviolence from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I also have a room in my house with safes in it, but nothing but guns in there. Right. So there's this kind of multidimensionality, right? You don't need to own guns to be multidimensional. I'm not making I'm not arguing that. But what I'm saying is that just because I'm someone who's advocated for justice, right, and believes that I am nonviolent, at the same time doesn't mean that I can't. So guns for me, the reason why I talked about guns, I don't love guns. You know what I mean? The reason why I talk about it because it's so polarizing, right? Yeah. So I'm a critical race scholar who also owns guns, and that for a long time was those were the two primary dog whistles, CRT and AR-15s, right? And so to me, it made sense to just talk about that, right? I can be a proponent of even teach CRT. Well, I got a bunch of AR-15s down in my safe, right? Yeah. Because people don't have to just be one thing,
right? Yeah, that was like that idea of just again telling your story, but then saying like this is not as representative of everything, right? But then knowing that, and I think you talked about mentioned like the idea of in order to be because it was something about pedagogy, radical joy pedagogy, like embracing someone's complete humanity. And and it's like it's not flattening, right? It's taking everything that someone's bringing into those cultural descriptions of people, not just the descriptions, or not just the what you see or what you hear, what the title is, right? It's everything, right?
And then we have to be careful. I need to qualify that a little bit too, because I'm not saying that for any moment we should tolerate things that are harmful either, right? And so I realized I had to add a section later after I did a review of the book because it could have read. And I put this in a different space. Could have read like, we just forgive everybody all the time for everything. I believe that you can forgive somebody and never speak to them again, right? Mm-hmm. So, because if the relationship is harmful, you can forgive if you're in a space to do so. That doesn't mean that you stay in a harmful relationship for the sake of your radical becoming.
One of my colleagues, Rick Balkin, who we had on the podcast, he talked about he did a study on forgiveness, and he's like, forgiveness is a lot for. I mean, and I think you talk about it in the book too, like forgiving people, like, but it's like. Yeah, I'm not going to talk to that person. And talking about, and Rick would talk about having, and he worked in institutions and where someone had to forgive somebody who abused them. But,
that's
tough. But it might not even ever and maybe that person has passed away or whatever. But I still need to forgive them because it's for me, not for them, right? In that case, right? And then so also too, talking about like Black joy and radical love and like. Some of these, kind of like these through lines that you had throughout the book. I don't know. You just want to talk. I mean, because you talk about being radical is about changing.
Yeah.
You just said the definition.
Changing the nature of who you are, right?
Changing the nature. But doing that through love, which is something. I mean, obviously, I like thinking.
I'm speaking your language, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have an example of something that when you talk of like, hey, when I'm talking about radical love, this is what I mean?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? And so this on the surface doesn't seem like an example, but it is. And so, I talked about this in the book. Like when my stepfather was abusive, man, he struggled, man. He wrestled with his own demons. And I'm not offering this as exculpatory. I'm the last person that would do that, right? And I don't know what help was available. He was a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
He abused his body, alcohol dependency, and other kind of drug. I mean, it's heroin probably at that time. And I remember, again, trigger warning. I mean, kicked a hole in my mom's throat. My mom's actually here on the beach. She's fine, but she almost died, right?
Yeah.
And this is 1981, right? And so nobody cared about domestic violence then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not institutional. I think he was out of jail in like a week,
Yeah.
right? And so, I rushed to my mom's aid, and he slapped me, and so this is, this his name was AC, and name him in the book, but he's
Mm-hmm.
my brother's father. He's my stepfather. My brother was a baby when these things were going on, so he had no
Yeah.
recollection of it. And he, my brother always wanted a relationship with his father, but I remembered the abuse, I remember the violence, I remember the fear that he represented for me, and so eventually AC got really, really sick. He had cancer. It decimated him. I mean, AC was a big guy. I mean, 6'2", 220, muscles everywhere. Um, by the time he passed, he was maybe 100 pounds because he couldn't
Mm.
eat anymore. I mean, that cancer ate
Yeah.
him up. Um, but he abused his, like I said, he abused his body for years and years, right? So we knew that something like that was going to happen, right? And so he passed, and then my brother asked me to speak at his funeral. And we're all adults at this time, and and my first thought, right, I didn't say this to my brother, is I'd rather spit on his grave than speak at his funeral. What am I going to do at his funeral?
Yeah.
Like my whole life, I lifted all the weights that I can find. I did every martial art that I could find. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, right?
Mm.
AC's face. Because I was gonna get him. I had a plan. When I didn't hold my life in very high esteem, I was gonna take his. And so, there was nothing that I could say that would that I felt I could offer there. But I had my nephews, I had some sons at that time, and I'd already been married for some time. You met Rachel, and Rachel's love changed me. You know me. I mean, I believe in God. I feel like she's a conduit for God's love, and it
Mm-hmm.
changed me. I was softer.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be soft. And so, because of the radical love that she loved me with, that made me feel like I was on a path towards wholeness, I I willingly spoke at AC's funeral. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't lie, right? I believe, AC was a prime example of there are people who need Jesus, right? So, yeah, I think that was basically what I said. Um, and so, anyway, but it was really well received. Like people came to me. I don't know if they were familiar with the story or not, and they were like, "Thank you so much for speaking." And my brother was really, really thankful. I wasn't the best big brother. I was really selfish growing up, and so I felt like that was something I could do for him. Um, and so, uh, and so anyway, and then in that moment, I had to forgive AC, and I hadn't forgiven AC. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
think I was probably in my early 30s at the time. I hadn't forgiven AC, but I did, and I felt some relief.
Yeah.
But it was incomplete though, Joe. And this is one of the things that you talk about. I had was called like an epiphenomenological moment, right? I had this epiphany while writing the book. And I realized that I couldn't understand why it didn't feel complete. Like I wanted to believe that I'd forgiven AC, but there was something still there, and I could feel it spiritually. I believe we're spiritual beings in human bodies, right? So I'm struggling with something spiritually, and uh, and I realized that I'd never forgiven myself,
Mm.
right? I'd never forgiven my 6-year-old self for my inability to protect my mom and
Mm.
to protect AC, and I'd never forgiven my 6-year-old self for the constant fear that I lived with, especially with men around. And I didn't forgive myself when I became older and I was reacting the same way,
Mm.
reacting with violence because that's all I knew. And so once I was able to see that, able to reflect on that, I was able to forgive myself. And then at that point, Joel, I was free. I was free. I'm free from that now. Say in Jesus' name, I'm free. And I feel it. I feel it all the time. I feel that freedom. I walk in that freedom. And it's because of the radical love that I received from my wife that I was even in a position to start that process, to start walking. I couldn't take the first step in that level of radical becoming. Were it not for Rachel, it wouldn't have been possible. And so that was radical love. And then I was able to actually, and this feels weird to say, man, because I grew up in a Christian cult. And so talking about loving yourself would be taboo, right?
Yeah.
Just love God. You love nothing else. But I mean, I was able to love myself differently, man. I was able to forgive my little 6, 7-year-old self, my teenage self. And I was able to recognize that there was value in my experiences at that time. And so all of that to me is this kind of circle of radical love.
So then is that then, because then also too, you talk a lot about joy, right? About
Yeah,
so is that like then now having received radical love, now the experience of joy, and like talking
yeah,
about,
yeah.
yeah, can you talk more about that? Like what does that look like?
Well, so I don't know. In my experience, I'm not saying that this is
Yeah,
true
yeah,
for everyone, right? I'm
right.
a rhetorician by training. I don't want to make sweeping generalizations. I do believe it's very
Everyone knows you're
difficult.
ready by training.
I do believe it's difficult to experience joy when you are besieged by unforgiveness. I feel like it
Mm,
requires joy, almost requires a level of forgiveness. I don't know. Maybe you can find joy first and that leads to forgiveness. Maybe that works. In my experience, if I'm holding on to things, it's very difficult to find joy.
yeah.
Right. So I see these things as not just correlation. I think I see them as causal. I feel like some work has to be done, but then that joy is an act of resistance because like there are things. So the way that our society works, right? Whatever people feel about capitalism, right? The way that this late stage profit driven stakeholder capitalism works is that it seeks to steal your joy, repackage, commoditize it, and then sell it back to you at a premium, right? The things that you already like to do, you might just like to hike, but there's a certain way and you need this certain backpack. You need these things. Like
Right.
your joy cannot just be what it is, right? And so for me, right, when I'm in a psychological kind of purgatory because I'm in a space where I'm bitter and I'm holding things like I can't even see what's right in front of me. And so to me, that causal relationship, when I'm able to forgive, then I can experience joy. And that joy is a form of resistance because I feel like many of the things in our society are for our benefit, but many of the things in our society are to make us feel insufficient. So we'll buy more stuff. And so
Mm,
just being able to find joy is an act of resistance. And then we talk about Black folks, right? If I'm right, and Blackness has been flattened and pathologized in this country because of anti-Blackness, finding joy, right? There's something I talked about in the book called the Black Joy Project. Finding joy in the midst of a country that has denigrated, enslaved, mass incarcerated Black bodies for years, finding joy is an act of resistance because it's almost like every weapon is formed against you. If you can still find joy, uh, if you can still find joy, it means you. So let me take a step back. So, like, trauma, intergenerational trauma, because of this process called methylation, it's in us at a cellular level, right? People who have been oppressed, not just Black folks, right? But it's in us, like indigenous folks, it's in us at a cellular level, right? And so it can be excised, but it takes intentional work to excise those things. At the same time, right? Resistance is also inwrought into us. Otherwise, we wouldn't still be here.
right.
But usually when we talk about Black history, we talk about indigenous history. It's the story of trauma and victimry and all these different things. We don't talk about the resilience. We don't talk about the resistance. The fact that we're still here is an act of resistance. And even further act of resistance is that we can find joy in a space where you can find freedom in an unfree land, right? And so I think for me, just figuring out how to be free, how to sing a freedom song in an unfree land is unmitigated act of resistance, right? And that's what joy looks like.
Yeah, I was just, again, like the looking at the book and then seeing one, I loved how you shared you and Rachel coming together. Like that
Yeah.
was that was a great. But then the letters that you're writing,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
is just what again. It feels like you're letting the reader inside of these conversations, which is
yeah,
I don't know, like that, letting us maybe like get a hint at some of the joy that you're trying to communicate
yeah,
to
yeah.
loved ones, and like the growth that you had, but then also to what you desire for them
Right,
moving
right.
forward. But and I want to honor your time. I know we used a lot of
I
it,
got it. I'm okay. I got a few more minutes. Look
guys.
at these. Yeah, all those kids are from my school. I don't know if I'm pointing in the right
Nice,
direction. They're doing some
yeah,
flip
no,
over there.
that's beautiful. So
Yeah.
you you had this line that I'd like to read. I'm going to read it to you, and maybe this might be a
Okay.
way to round us out here. You wrote this:
Okay.
to love is to act, to forgive is to be free, to choose joy is to radically become, and this above all else is the beautiful path. Like that kind of
Yeah.
encapsulates everything we just talked about. But I mean,
Yeah.
What would you? I mean, so we talk about like Amazon Plan is about good talk, real learning, better
Yeah,
teaching. Like, what would you want
yeah,
an educator, someone who's looking to teach, whether it's in in the living room, in the classroom,
yeah,
in the college class or whatever? Like, what would you want people to take from this
yeah,
and to think about how to take action, how to act out of love?
yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I think for us, man, for educators, it's like self-care has to be self-care has to be paramount.
Mm,
I know so many educators, I've been a teacher at every level and they just pour out and pour out and pour out. And nobody's filling their cup. And it's just, I mean, you know this, right? You work with
yeah.
teachers and it's just, that's not sustainable and it's not healthy. So we have to figure out how to love ourselves, right? And loving ourselves may require forgiving other people and may require forgiving ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sometimes as teachers, right, we unintentionally do a disservice to the students under our care. And then I know teachers who will lament that, and that becomes a stumbling block for them, right? And it's good to reflect on that. It's good to want to be better, but it's not good to be stuck in a purgatory where we can't move forward either, right? This kind of introspective purgatory. Introspection is okay. It's all right. But if you get stuck there, then you're no help to yourself, you're no help to your students. And so I think that a love of justice. I mean, I would love for every educator to love all their students. Sometimes that seems difficult, right? But if you love justice, then the work that you do will be informed by a level of radical love. If you understand that, and we know this like as teachers, right? I work with middle schoolers, elementary schoolers. It's a tough crowd sometimes.
Yeah.
Those kids they're not just like that though. That's
Right.
not who they are. Well, so and so, watch out for Danny today because Danny is just this. No, there are circumstances happening in Danny's life that
Right.
are causing those types of reactions, right? His autonomic nervous system has been activated. Now we need to figure out how to help Danny regulate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea for me, for educators, is if we love justice and we understand that not every student, right, has the same experience, how can we, as whole people striving to be whole, realizing that we're in a place where we're shifting all the time, how can we create a space that's safe for that student to experience this thing and not be essentially flattened into that type of student for the rest of their time with you, right? So there's that work. That work is necessary. And then love. I mean, love is the most radical force in this universe, right? Real
Yeah.
radical love, like it changes everything. If you love justice, then you don't just advocate for yourself anymore, advocate for people who look like you.
Mm-hmm.
You start to work against systems that create and maintain inequity because you love justice. And so I need every educator to fall in love with justice. Funny me saying this, our youngest son, who you haven't met yet, is just, right? Yeah, justice.
Yeah.
So I'm in love with justice, but we all need to be in love with justice, right? And so there's that. And then just remember that, thinking about this kind of end of history confirmation bias, like you are shifting every day. You're in a space where you're becoming anyway, but
Yeah.
you need to make it radical becoming. I know people who are becoming worse, right? Because of our political climate is ultra polarizing and they're becoming worse on both sides. We have an opportunity to become better every single day. And I
Yeah.
think that we need to latch on to that. And a lot of times we just look at the end product. If you look at the end product, you'll never make it to the beautiful path because the beautiful path is that journey of radically becoming. That's what I figured out, right? That's the spoiler alert.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no destination. It's recursive. It's pluperfect, right? We're always on this path. And if we appreciate the beauty of the path, then we change throughout the process. And so I just want to encourage all my friends and family that are educators, just embrace that beautiful path. Focus on your wholeness, right? Because if you're not whole, it's going to be very difficult to make anybody else whole or to create a
Yeah.
space where students can be whole. Focus on your wholeness and then just appreciate the process, appreciate the path. That's what I'm doing now, and it's changed my life.
Nice. Two questions I like to ask, and maybe you've already
Sure.
covered some of them. One is, what's something lately that you've learned on how to teach better? Anything you got?
Oh man. So I just realized, and I think I knew this maybe conceptually because I read about it, but I didn't know it experientially. What I learned in this acting model has served me well as a dean, right? I'm dealing with adults now. A lot of times adults are more difficult than kids, right? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
is how to be an active listener, right?
Mm.
And then I started to get into something, from Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's work, nonviolent communication. Highly recommend that for all educators because it helps de-escalate situations that can, because I get brought in to coach teachers on how to deal with how to deal with hate speech.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what we focus on is nonviolent communication, right? And there's 4 principles. I may not get them right now, but it's first you make an observation, you just observe what happened, and there's no value, right? Oh man, I can't think of observe. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, any other time I can remember it. But the last one is a request, right? So there's 4 steps. It's observe, need, request, and then there's one that starts with the F, but I can't think of it right now. And so you can't, and then we do this a lot. I did this a lot. You've probably done this. As teachers, we ask students to stop doing something. You can't ask someone to do a don't, right? So instead you have to shift it. Well, Joel, if you so I'm observing that you continuously speak without raising your hand. In this class, we have a rule that you raise your hand before we speak. We can revisit that rule, but until we do, that's the current rule. So I notice, oh, it's feeling. That's what the F is. When you do that, it makes me feel like either the instructions haven't been clearly articulated, or you just don't feel like these rules apply to you in the same way. And so I need to know that we're all on the same page, right? So it's observation, feeling, need, and then request. So I would just request that if you don't like this, if you don't like the fact that that you would propose to the class that we change this during a town hall. Um, and so we will need to do that before we can move forward. I know teachers don't always have time for these types of things, but we have to figure out how to make time for it.
Yeah.
Or my immediate request is until we take that vote, you raise your hand before you speak for the next week until we can have this conversation. But there's no value judgment. You're not a bad kid. You're not doing anything wrong, right? So I think for teaching, and it's old, it's not a new concept, but like Marshall Rosenberg, he ended up talking a lot about marriages before he passed. But I mean, he did work on like negotiating war, right? He was talking to folks in Palestine, folks in Israel. Like this is not like just. So if we apply those principles, and it's helped me so much in dealing with young folks and dealing with adults too, because there's no value judgment. People don't feel judged. They don't feel othered. They don't feel ostracized. They actually feel heard.
Yeah. That's awesome. Final thing is been getting into movies and records and books. So like, what is one piece of like physical media, something that you could physically put in somebody's hand, not something online, something you'd put into somebody's hands, like, hey, go experience this. I know you've mentioned a lot of books and things, like, so maybe it's something that you've already mentioned, but what's something you put in somebody's hands? Hey, go enjoy that. You'll get some.
That's a great question. That's a great question. What have I been doing that's been I mean, I have more book recommendations, but I like to watch. I've been watching shows lately. I like The Greatest Showman. If you haven't seen The Greatest Showman, go watch that. I watched it like 4 times. I didn't think I was into musicals. I'd never watched. So, background, I don't need to talk about rhetoric anymore, but like my emphasis in rhetoric was image and narrative. And so everything was text. So we actually watched a lot of movies, we watched a lot of books, and then we do literary criticism.
Yeah.
And so I can't watch a movie without like deconstructing the tropes, right? What are these tropological things going on? So it's not even fun at a certain point, right?
Yeah.
So in order to do that, I don't watch any deep movies. I just it's either slapstick or it's all action, right? So I don't do musicals at all, right? I watched this musical 4 or 5 times, and I cried every time because there's so much going on there. And so if you haven't seen that, I would just recommend watching that movie, sitting with it, because
I wrote that
I might
down.
watch it again after this. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Because I mean, even too, like I've got the record too, and it's like,
kind
of experience that way. Getting kids up with that, blasting it in the morning. This is good.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best. One of the best movies I've ever seen, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, Jeremiah, thank you so much. Well, one, thank you so much for putting this book out into the world. I know all the work that's gone into it, all the trips that you're putting all the voice records down, but then also too, just for the time to come on, and it's always a pleasure. And I'm glad to see my friend again. So yeah,
likewise, man. We'll connect again soon. Thank you so much for the opportunity. God bless you guys, and we'll talk soon.
All right, there it is. It was fast and furious, but again, I'm just so excited that Jeremiah took time from his day up in Reading to have this conversation, and also too thankful for him for sharing this work. I really do mean that. I mean, I know how much. Well, I'm trying to put together a book, so I know how much has gone into what I'm trying to do, and I can't imagine Jeremiah's put out multiple books, and you can see that this one is pretty personal. So again, thankful for him and what he's doing to put this work out into the world. But before we wrap up, Here's a question to carry with you this week. What part of yourself is still becoming? And what would it look like to make space for that growth? Just something to ponder. If you have something, you can send it to me at the mailbag, joel@amazonplanet.com. Or if you got anything else that you want to share, send it along to joel@amazonplanet.com. All right, now for the physical media of the episode, the part of the show where I share an album, a movie, or a book I've been listening to, watching, or reading. It's my small way of connecting with you, and if I'm being honest, it's also probably my excuse to celebrate physical media, that tangible stuff that pulls you off the interwebs for a bit and helps you be just a little bit more present. Jeremiah mentioned the movie The Greatest Showman, because talked about her performance that's happening at the school he's a part of. And I have that on Blu-ray, by the way. And I also I endorse his call for wanting to put the Greatest Showman movie into somebody's hands. My pick, I'd like to do the Greatest Showman soundtrack, which I have on vinyl. Again, it brings up emotions. I don't know, for some reason there's something about the role of the father in the movie that comes out in some of the songs, like From Now On. And hearing the child's voice in that second song, A Million Dreams. I think it's A Million Dreams. Yep. Also, too, want to endorse, and I don't have it yet, The Greatest Showman Reimagined, with various artists like Pink and the Zac Brown Band. I think Panic at the Disco are redoing some of the songs. I don't know. And also, too, like, this is one where we do karaoke every now and then. It's a big karaoke hit, all these different songs. So anyway, you'll enjoy it. So if you've never seen The Greatest Showman, which I hope you will, and then also too, just listen to the soundtrack, lots of good stuff there. All right, that's going to be it for today's conversation. It's a long one today. Thank you for hanging with us. Show notes are available at amazonplanet.com, episode 100, amazonplanet.com/episode 146. Thank you so much to Jeremiah Sims for sharing his time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin, as always, for the music in this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a colleague. It really helps more folks find these conversations. You can also reach out with ideas, questions, or opportunities by sending me a note to joel@amazonplanet.com, or join the email list, get that Amazon Planet dispatch to stay connected and keep the conversation going. Wherever you see a button for joining the email list at Amazon Planet, you click that, you'll get that next edition, which should come out shortly. Thanks again for spending time on Amazon Planet. Good talk, real learning, better teaching. Peace.